Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we are diving into one of the most powerful and honestly, most necessary tools in the Selenium toolkit, especially when you're dealing with modern, dynamic web apps. If you've ever been totally stumped by a tricky user interface, well, this explainer is for you.
So let's just start with a classic automation challenge. You're looking at what seems like a simple drop-down menu, right? But here's the catch. The menu options only pop up when you hover your mouse over it. This brings up a really big question. How can your script possibly click on something that doesn't even exist when the page first loads?
And the short answer is, it can't. A simple standard .click command is blind. It can't interact with an element it can't see. And if you think about today's web applications, so many critical parts, tooltips, right-click menus, drag and drop features, they're all hidden until the user does something. This is a huge, huge roadblock for automation.
But of course, Selenium has a brilliant solution for this exact problem. It's called the Actions class. Honestly, the best way to think of it is like your own digital hand. It's capable of performing all the little, nuanced things a real user would do, going way beyond a simple click to really truly interact with the page.
So here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll talk a bit more about why this is such a common problem. Then we'll jump right into the code for handling menus and different kinds of clicks. After that, we are going to master drag and drop. And finally, we'll get into the pro-level details of how this all actually works under the hood.
All right, so let's set the stage. Why do we even need a whole special class just for this stuff? What's the big deal?
You know, the bottom line is this. Modern user interfaces are dynamic. They change. A script that just scans for elements when the page loads is going to fail, because the very elements it needs to test, like those drop-down options, they literally don't exist yet. You have to simulate the mouse hover first just to make them appear.
Okay, theory's over. Let's get practical. We are now opening up the core toolbox. These are the actual methods you are going to be using day in and day out to automate these complex mouse gestures.
And first up, the one you'll probably use the most, the mouse over or hover. This is the key that unlocks all those hidden menus.
And the process is actually really clean. It just breaks down into 3 simple steps. First, you create your actions object and you pass in your WebDriver. Second, you find the element you want to hover over, same as always. And finally, step 3, you tell the object to move to that element. Now, and this is the most important part, none of this actually happens until you call the .perform method. That's the command that says, okay, do it now.
Next up in our toolbox is the right-click. Now, in the world of automation, you'll often hear this called a context click because, it usually opens a menu specific to the context of what you clicked on. And what's so great about this is that we see the exact same pattern here. You create the object, find the element, and just swap in the context quick method. Then you call .perform, and you're done. This consistency is what makes the Actions class so easy to learn and so powerful. The same logic applies to other actions too, like the double click. Some applications use this to trigger different functions, maybe like copying text from one field to another with a single button.
And, you probably guessed it, it is the exact same pattern again. Find the element, call double click, and then call .perform. See? Once you learn one, you pretty much know them all. It's that simple.
Okay, now I want you to pay close attention to this slide because it addresses a super common trap that trips up so many people. Let's say you double-click a button that copies the word welcome into a text box. Your first instinct might be to verify this using .getText on the input box, but it will come back empty. Why? Because .getText only reads the visible inner text of an element, like the label on a button. For an input box, the text you actually see is stored in its value attribute. So the correct method here is .getAttribute value. This is a really crucial distinction to remember.
All right, let's tackle what seems like the most complex action of all, actually dragging an element from one place and dropping it somewhere else on the page.
You might think this would involve a whole complicated sequence of commands, right? Click and hold, move the mouse, release, but the Actions class handles it with a single, beautiful command. All you have to do is identify your source element and your target element. Then you just call the drag and drop method. It takes care of the entire click, hold, drag, release sequence for you when you call .perform. It's amazing.
So far, we've really focused on the what these commands do. Now, let's peel back the layers a little and understand the how. Knowing these details is what will make your scripts more robust and help you figure out what's going on when things don't work as expected.
Here is probably the biggest point of confusion, but it's really simple. Just remember this.
.perform does everything. It builds the action and executes it. That's why you are going to use it 99% of the time. The .build method is really only for very advanced cases where you want to assemble a complex action now, but maybe run it later. For your everyday work, just stick with .perform.
And that brings us to another subtle but really important difference. Actions with an S at the end versus action without the S. Think of it like this. Actions is the class. It's your entire toolbox that you use to define what you want to do. Action, on the other hand, is an interface. It represents the finished blueprint, the specific sequence of steps you've built, which is now ready to be executed.
So why would you ever need that blueprint? Well, this is that advanced scenario we just talked about. You can use .build to create a really complex action sequence, like say a hover, then a click, then a drag, and you can store that whole sequence in a single action variable. Then you can pass that variable around in your code and just call .perform on it whenever you're finally ready to execute the entire chain of events.
So let's do a super quick recap of your new Advanced Automation Toolkit. For hovering, you've got Move to Element. For right-clicking, you've got Context Click. For double-clicking, you have Double Click. And for moving things around, you have the incredibly powerful Drag and Drop. These 4 methods are going to handle the vast majority of complex UI interactions you will ever face.
With the Actions class now in your arsenal, those parts of your application that used to seem untestable are now totally within your reach. The question is no longer if you can automate them, but which one are you going to tackle first?